Hello, everyone. Welcome to our World Book Day event. My name is Amber. I work for the Anne Frank Trust, and later we will be joined by Thomas Harding, who is a fantastic author who has written a children's book called The House on the Canal. He's here to share with us his own opinions and also his writing expertise for a writing task that we will be doing a bit later on. So I'm going to share with you the aims for today's session first of all. And before I kind of get into that, I just want to let you know that throughout there will be opportunity to ask questions and vote in polls on Slido, and you can scan that QR code on the right-hand side to do that. But our main aims for today are to celebrate World Book Day, to understand why telling stories from the Holocaust is important, focusing on Anne Frank's diary. And later on, there'll be opportunity to write about a safe place that is free from prejudice and discrimination. And that will very much be inspired by Thomas Harding's book, The House on the Canal. And he will be guiding us with his writing expertise later. Just to say that later on, you will need a pen and pencil and some paper for the writing activity. So if you want to kind of get those ready now, that would be wonderful. So next slide, please. Thank you. So the two authors that we will be celebrating today in particular, as I said, are Anne Frank and Thomas Harding, who will be joining us shortly. But before we get into Thomas, we're going to show you a little video about Anne Frank. So if you haven't had one of our education programs delivered in your school, this is just a quick kind of summary of Anne Frank's life, who she is, and introduces you a little bit to her life story and diary. Okay.
August 4th, 1944. In a house on the Prinsengracht in Amsterdam, 8 people in hiding are arrested. One of them is Anne Frank. Anne Frank is born in 1929 in Germany. Her parents are Otto and Edith, and she has one sister, Margot. The Frank family is Jewish. The economic crisis is causing a lot of social unrest in Germany, resulting in the rise of Adolf Hitler's Nazi Party. In 1933, the Nazis come into power and discrimination against the Jews increases. Otto and Edith worry about the rise of the Nazi Party. They decide to move to the Netherlands. Margot and Anne also arrive in Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, Anne attends the Montessori school. Her 2 best friends are Sanne and Hammerly. But then, in May 1940, the German army invades the Netherlands. The Nazis occupy large parts of Europe and start to discriminate against Jews everywhere. Anne and Margot have to switch to separate Jewish schools. One restriction is followed by another. For her 13th birthday, Anne receives a diary. This diary will become very important to her. Suddenly, on the 5th of July 1942, a letter arrives ordering Margot to leave for a Nazi labor camp. Otto and Edith have made secret preparations to go into hiding. Where would we go into hiding, Anne wonders. One of the first things she packs is her diary. Wearing as many clothes as possible, the Frank family leave their house. The hiding place is the annex at the office of Anne's father. Otto and Anne tidy up the annex. Anne brightens up her room by sticking images to the wall. The people in hiding are helped by Victor Kugler, Johannes Kleiman, Miep Gies and Beb Voskuil, who all work in Otto's company. The Frank family is soon joined by 3 other people, Herman and August van Pels and their son Peter. Anne also welcomes Fritz Pfeffer. Fritz brings bad news. All those deportations. In her diary, Anne writes about life in the annex, about the arguments, which can be fierce, particularly between her and her mother. And also with Fritz, there are never-ending disagreements. Anne writes of her nightmares and the fear of all in the annex to be discovered. In their 2nd year of hiding, Anne and Peter fall in love. On the 4th of August, something terrible happens. They have been betrayed. They are arrested.
Okay, great. So I'm sure that you will have heard of Anne Frank's story and possibly spoken about it a little bit in school as well. And one of the main things that Anne Frank is famous for is her legacy that she left behind, which was her diary, a really, really powerful piece of writing that has sold approximately 35 million copies and has inspired many more books. It's been translated into 70 different languages, and it's reached really far and wide and given that impact to many, many people who have kind of discovered the power of writing and Anne's legacy as a result of that. Next slide, please. So I am going to introduce to you now Thomas Harding. He is here to share with us his writing journey. Hello, Thomas.
Hey, Amber. Great to see you.
Yes, lovely to have you with us today. Thank you so much.
Happy World Book Day.
Yeah, happy World Book Day. First of all, Thomas, if we can start off with your writing journey, if you wouldn't mind, because I think lots of people would be really interested to hear about your writing journey and how you kind of came to writing.
You know, I started writing when I was a young lad. I probably 6 or 7, I started really reading books and started practicing writing. And ever since then, I've been writing stories, writing poetry. And then when I became an adult, I professionally worked as a writer, first as a journalist and more recently writing books, both for adults and for younger readers.
Amazing. And what kind of genres particularly would you say that you're drawn to, both in your adult and children's book? What kind of connects your work, would you say?
You know, I like stories. I mean, I love to learn about other people. I'm a very curious person. When I was younger, my brothers and sisters would get very cross with me because I'd be always asking questions. And so I just love finding out about the world. So mostly I write non-fiction. So those are books about true stories, about real people, about real events. Often they'll be in the past, they'll be historical. But I've also, and those are mostly for adults, but I also have written 4 books for younger audiences, one of which we're going to talk about today. And because I've always loved books. And when I was, I don't know, I was probably when in my 20s, I worked in a children's bookshop. And that's when I really fell in love with the whole idea of books for younger audiences. I love the pictures. I love the stories. I love how they're quite short, and so they're quite quick to read. And I love all the kind of opportunities that when you put pictures and words together, they really bring about, I think, new possibilities for telling stories and for introducing new subjects.
That's the dream, Thomas. And even as you're kind of talking about that now, I can see your real kind of passion for writing coming across. What is it, would you say, about, do you find the process of writing itself really powerful and therapeutic too?
You know, I mean, I have to be honest, I love writing. I love every aspect of it. I like meeting people and finding out about their stories. I like going to libraries and archives, places where the documents are, where you can find those old photographs or films, or visiting a new place and discovering a house, or, you know, somewhere that something really important has happened. For me, it's like being an explorer. You know, explorers, they go to new lands or they go to new places. And that's what it feels like for me. I'm the first person often who finds a document or finds a story. And it's so exciting. I feel like an adventurer discovering new places.
Amazing. Thank you. So that kind of brings me on to the next question then, which is why you are particularly kind of drawn to Anne Frank's story with your children's book that, as you said, we're mostly going to be focusing on The House on the Canal today, which is your children's book that you have written. Why were you inspired by Anne Frank's story in particular?
I think probably 3 reasons. First of all, I mean, I just think she's an incredible writer. I've read her diary. I don't know if other people have read her diary. I've read her diary. It's beautifully written. It's I couldn't put it down. I found it, you know, it's very, very powerful, very funny at times, quite sad at times,
quite scathing at times as well,
and also very real. You know, the way she describes her family and the personalities, and Peter, who she's, this boy. I've also, I'm also, my family has a similar history to her family. So my family were German Jews. So that's my personal story. My grandmother had to flee the Nazis in 1930s. So it's quite personal to me. And the other reason why I was attracted to this particular story is I've been writing a series of books about houses, how houses tell stories, how they've witnessed amazing events. This was my second book about a house, and Anne Frank lived in this particular house in Amsterdam, which is in the Netherlands. She lived there, or she hid there for 2 years, but the house had been around for 400 years. So the house had seen all this extraordinary history over all that time. And I was really interested to see what happened before Anne arrived and also after. And there was many similarities, strangely, over time. So you see these kind of repeated stories, and also just fascinating people and what happened to them. Some of it, again, is very happy. Some of it's not so happy. Sometimes there were some horses, for example, who lived. They're the only ones who lived in the house. You know, it's seen some amazing history. So the house itself was what attracted me to this particular story.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Thomas. I am going to invite our audience now to scan that code for the Slido, please. If you could pop just your first name and the school that you are from into Slido, if you are joining us on that would be amazing. And we would like to open this question up to you, which is, why do we celebrate World Book Day? So we'd like you to vote on one of these reasons. Which do you think kind of resonates the most with you and your class? Thomas, is there one that particularly is powerful for you there?
You know, I mean, I've been thinking about this because I was shown these questions earlier, and I don't really want to have to choose because they're all really great, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, to share the joy of reading using our favorite books, yes. To celebrate authors, okay. To learn inspiring stories, that one really rings true for me. To understand the importance of reading and writing. I mean, I think reading and writing is so important. You know, it took me a while to learn how to read and write. I struggled a little bit. I actually didn't start talking till I was 3.5, which is quite late. And I wasn't really reading full sentences till 6, 7, 8. So I was quite late to reading. And I think it was really stories about history which really got me going. I remember some amazing books I was reading when I was younger, and then I couldn't stop when I started, and then I couldn't stop.
You'd opened a can of worms. Oh, that's lovely. I think for me as well, it'd probably be to learn inspiring stories, because I think I've been drawn later in life more to kind of non-fiction stories, whereas when I was younger, I think fiction was very much the focus for me. But for our audience, it feels like to share the joy of reading using our favorite books is a clear winner there, which is amazing. And maybe later on we can kind of discuss some of those favorite books as well. Amazing. Thank you. Okay, we've got another Slido question for you now, which is, we are shortly going to move into a writing activity, which will be led by Thomas. And we would like you to just kind of tell us at the moment, how confident do you feel in writing about a safe place free from prejudice and discrimination? And we are going to kind of recap what those terms mean as well. So if you're not quite sure what prejudice and discrimination is at the moment, maybe just choose something that best reflects your confidence right now. Okay, got some quick answers coming in already.
Yeah,
which
really
is
quick.
Great.
Yeah,
very
look at
quick.
that. Yeah. People are really engaged.
Yeah, and it seems like our audiences, they're quite confident already, which is great. So we can kind of tease that out a little bit more in the writing activity. Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for those. Before we move to the writing activity itself, Thomas, it would be wonderful if you could read us a few pages from The House on the Canal, if that's okay.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to. Okay, so this is the book that we're talking about today, The House on the Canal. And you can see on the front cover, you can see Anne Frank there with her father Otto. And that's the house where all this happened. This story happens in Amsterdam, as I said earlier, which is in the Netherlands, the country of the Netherlands, or some people call it Holland, I guess. And so this is the history of this house over 400 years, but we don't have time to read the whole book. So I'm just going to focus on when Anne was there. Again, she was hiding there with her family and some other families. Okay, so I'm going to read this story, and hopefully you'll be able to see the pictures. Great, fantastic. Okay, so this I'm reading, as you can see, I'm reading the same thing that you're looking at. All right, I should tell you that the pictures were drawn. I don't draw the pictures. I researched the story, and we could talk about maybe this a bit later about the process. But the illustrations were made by the amazing Britta Teckentrup. Maybe some of you have heard that name. She's done a lot of books. Britta Teckentrup. She's German. Okay. The city was no longer safe for the girl with the sweet smile. The girl with the sweet smile hid in the house with her father and mother and sister and 4 others. The top floors of the annex were now a hiding place. They had to be silent. Otherwise, the police and soldiers would find them. So still, not a sound. Each minute was a day. Each day was a year. They were helped by 6 friends who brought them food and things they needed. And all the while, downstairs in the warehouse, the men continued to pack herbs and spices. They were unaware of the hiding place, where the young girl wrote in her diary, painting pictures of her days with words. And after dinner, they gathered around a radio and listened to stories from far away. Shh! Was that someone coming? They must be quiet. Not a peep. During the night, the girl sneaked upstairs and gazed through the window at the chestnut tree in the garden. She looked up at the stars and the moon and dreamed of a golden future. And still, the world went on outside without them. One hot summer's day, policeman and a soldier came to the house. The men stomped up the secret stairs and found the girl and her family and their friends. They took them away from the house. The bells from the church did not ring. Later, when the police had gone, 2 kind women picked up the sweet girl's diary and kept it safe. A cold, cold winter, a cold, cold wind blew through the house. Months went by. Stomachs were empty once again. Until one day, soldiers arrived with different uniforms. There was dancing and singing and laughter in the street. The tall man came back to the house. He was tired and alone. The kind women gave him his daughter's diary, which he read with a crack in his heart and tears in his eyes. And he shared it with his family, then his friends, and then with the world. A year passed, and then another. The house now broke apart. The annex roof fell down. The windows cracked. Rain poured in. People took the pine floors and the lovely green door. The house was so sad. The girl's father worked with the community to clean and repair the house. They fixed the roof and the sturdy pine floors and painted the shiny windows and added a new green front door. Today, people visit the house from far and wide. They learn about the girl with the sweet smile and the diary that she wrote and the house where she lived and her golden dreams of tomorrow. And once again, the church bells ring. Dong, 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 4 times every hour.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Thomas, for sharing that with us and for reading that out so wonderfully for us. There's a few things that really kind of stand out to me from those extracts from your book. Each minute a day, each day a year. I think that really just quite simply gets across that kind of excruciating and tormenting feeling sometimes of being in hiding, and how tedious that must have been. But at the same time, obviously, some moments of safety found in the annex too, and some moments of kind of closeness with other inhabitants at the annex. Is there anything from I guess, that little bit that you've just read out that is kind of really hits you each time you read it?
There is. I think it's the moment when Anne's father has the diary for the first time. I mean, I find it very emotional. I mean, it must have been so difficult for him to read the diary. In fact, he talks about it, and it took him a while to actually have the courage to read it. And then when he actually did read it, he was so amazed by his daughter, who he learned so many things he never knew about his daughter. And he was so impressed by her and her writing, her powers of observation, the way that she described what life was like in the annex, how funny she was, the stories that she wrote. It was... when I was a child, I hated being bored. I hated all those seconds, those endless seconds. And I think I really feel that with her. And yet she did something amazing with her time, didn't she? She wrote this extraordinary book, which so many people have read. And I didn't know this until recently, but she actually went back again and edited it. So she wrote a first version of the book when I think she was 13 or 14. And then a year or so later, when she was still in hiding, she went back and she actually made changes. So she really wanted the writing to be as best as it could be, as good as it could be. And she wrote that one day she hoped the book would be published. So it was, the writing itself was really important to her.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. In a moment, we're going to move to our writing activity, but we have a question here from Huda that says, how did you find out all of the history about the house? Which I think is just a great question to kind of lead us into our next topic as well. Would you mind sharing?
It's a really good question. And thank you so much for your question. So the answer is, I went to the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam, and the people there were very kind to me. They helped me with the research. But then I also went to archives. These are the places where you can find the old documents. You can find the photographs and the letters, and also the writing that other people have made. And then the other thing I did, which was super fun, is I tried to find all the other families who lived at the house. And I did that with the help of some researchers, because I do not speak Dutch. And so they helped me find. And then there was this one amazing family who lived, as it happened, on a boat in Amsterdam, near the house. And I knocked on their door and I said, would you be interested in talking to me? They said, fantastic. And they had no idea that they had this connection to this very famous house. So sometimes when you're doing the research, you can discover wonderful, wonderful things.
Amazing. Thank you. We've got another question here from Ayan, which says, which authors have inspired you? So I wonder were there any other children's authors, for example, that really inspired your work for this?
I'm so glad you asked me that question. So I think the answer is yes. I've got a few. I thought that someone might ask me that question. So I've got a few here for different ages. So this one is, I'm actually quite new to this book, A Monster Calls, by Patrick Ness, which is an amazing book. If anyone hasn't read it, probably all of you have, but this was new to me. I absolutely love this book. The illustrations are incredible and the story is very, very powerful. Then I've got this one here, which is one of my favorite books for younger readers, Trubloff by John Burningham. It's about this mouse that plays, can you see here, the balalaika, which is a Russian instrument with a kind of a triangle shape. And one of the things I love the most about this is there's a picture of the mouse Trubloff and his sister on skis going across the snow, which I totally love. And then one more for people who are interested in this type of history. Again, this is non-fiction. This is an amazing book.
I've read that one.
Yeah, Mouse by Art Spiegelman. It's a graphic novel. I don't know if you can see. It's a graphic picture book. It's about many of these kind of stories, and you can probably see again they're mice. Maybe I like mice a lot, but this is That's an amazing book. So I
It really is.
highly
Yeah.
recommend that. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And we also wanted to share with our audience as well. We have actually got a little kind of discount package for the house on the canal. Thomas, I don't know if you want to talk through this discount.
Oh, absolutely. So we have a lovely bookshop near where I live, and I said that I might be talking to a few people today, and they said they would love to help out. They love World Book Day. They think the Anne Frank story should be known widely. So they said that just for today, for the people attending this event, they're doing two things. They've discounted the actual book price itself, which is really generous of them, and also they're not going to charge for post and packing. So for anyone who's interested, this is not something you normally get. This is a really great thing, and I think it's because they really believe in this book. So I think you can. So here's the book. I think you can either use that QR code, or you can see there's a website there as well. And it's One Tree Books is the local bookshop, my local bookshop, and they're one. It's good to support a local bookshop as well. They're lovely people. Sally and Tim run the bookshop, and they're just wonderful with children's books and with other books as well. So please do support them.
Beautiful. Thank you, Thomas. And we will be sending the link around afterwards as well. So if you haven't managed to scan the QR code, don't worry, we will be sending it around later. So we're going to move on to our writing task now, Thomas, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. So we thought today it'd be really great, because it's World Book Day, to have a little writing opportunity. We've talked a little bit about stories and about the idea of how to tell those stories, and we'd love to hear what yours are. So here's the writing task. We'd love if you would take a couple of minutes just to write about a safe space that is free from prejudice and discrimination. So just as a reminder, what do we mean by prejudice? Prejudice is when people prejudge others without knowing the full facts. And then what is discrimination? Discrimination is when people are treated unfairly or worse because of who they are. So we'd love it if you wanted to just grab a pen or whatever instrument you're using to write with, to write a sentence or two, write about a safe space that is free from prejudice and discrimination.
Lovely, thank you. And this is kind of inspired as well, isn't it, Thomas, by your book and how the annex was the safe place for Anne for a few years while she was in hiding. What would your kind of, if I can put you on the spot a bit, Thomas, what would your safe place be, do you think?
Well, I think there's something really beautiful about, where we live. We all live in different places. It might be a small place, a big place. It might be, in the city, not in the city. It might be full of people or not full of people. But pretty much everyone has somewhere to live, somewhere to sleep. And that's a home. Hopefully that's a safe space. And for me, my home is definitely my safe space. I also like going for walks. There's a little river near where I live, and I love it's so beautiful with the trees, and there's some ducks, and there's a white stork who lives there, and I like to see if that white stork lives there. And my other safe space would be maybe visiting my family members, maybe one of my family members. I like, it's nice to connect with them. My parents, I like to go visit my parents and my uncle and aunt. They have a lovely place to live. So I think I have a few safe spaces, places which are really important to me, which I keep going back to, and they remind me often some very special memories have happened there. And so I like going back to that. And how about you, Amber? What's your safe space?
Sort of similar in some ways, Thomas. I would say my house, but an idealized version of my house as well. So I'm imagining in my safe space that I would have a kind of home library, I think, that would be a lovely, sort of relaxing place for me to go to. I've always wanted a proper reading chair and things like that, but never quite got round to it at the moment. So that would be the kind of safe space that I would be describing there. So I
love the idea of a reading chair. That's very nice.
Yeah.
Would your legs be up? Would your legs be down?
Let's say up for maximum comfort.
Very nice. Very, very good. Love that.
Yeah, so maybe our audience could kind of take some inspiration from that. Think about what kind of sounds you might be able to hear at this place. What
Yeah.
would it really look like? It would be lovely if we could start hearing some examples as well. So if you are ready to share anything in Slido, that would be great. Just a sentence or two that is your best sentence or two that you would like to share with us. That would be wonderful. We would love to hear them. Whilst we're waiting for those to come in, Thomas, we have got a quote here from Anne's diary, which I think is really kind of applicable
Lovely.
For this kind of conversation. She wrote in her diary on the 5th of April, "Dear Kitty, writing allows me to record everything, all my thoughts, ideals and fantasies." And obviously we would kind of hope that doesn't have to be a fantasy, writing about a safe place that's free from prejudice and discrimination. But unfortunately, in our world, things can become kind of challenging at times. And sometimes we can use writing as that sort of escapism. I just wondered if this was kind of something that connected with you in your work, or do you feel like because you're more drawn to nonfiction as well, maybe not so much? How do you feel?
Well, it's interesting. So I write right on the edge between fiction and nonfiction. So I'm always trying to imagine things like sounds and smells and what people said, and then I have to actually find out what those things are. So it's kind of two steps. I see a question here. Do we have time for a little question while people are doing their writing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question from Miss Cherry in her class. How long did it take you to write this book? Interesting. So it took me, the first time I wrote the book, after I did the research. I first do the research, which takes a number of weeks. I went to the house and I met a lot of the families, like I said. To actually write the first draft, the first version, took me about a week. But then the real work comes with the editing. So after I've written the first draft, I had to go back and edit. So what I do is I read the text back to myself. And then I can hear things I might want to change. And I probably do, I'm going to say 25 or 30 different drafts. I mean, I just do it again. And then I share it with friends. I share it with my wife. I share it with the people I work with, the publisher. Then I share it with the illustrator. And everyone's giving their thoughts. So it's a real process.
Amazing. And just whilst we're waiting for these kind of answers to come in as well, Thomas, I'd love to ask, do you always believe in the project that you're writing on? Do you always have that goal of it kind of being published as well? Or is there a lot of kind of, I've written that's never going to be used? Or how do you kind of go about that process?
That's really interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, now, yes, that's important to me because this is my job. So it's important to me that the books are published. When I was younger, absolutely not. I would just write because I loved to write. And then I found ways I would read my poems to my family, or an article, an essay would be published in the school newspaper, but I was writing for the sake of writing. Yeah. I did keep a diary myself for a while, so that's never been published. So there's different things. I do think it's really, for me, it's important to write what I want to write. And so I'm in a lucky position that I can do that. But I think probably I always wanted to just write what I wanted to write. Yeah. But then it takes a lot of work. And that's the thing. I think people are surprised. I mean, at how much work it takes in terms of just the editing but I love that. I like listening to the words and wanting the words to really sing. So for me, that's fun.
Amazing, thank you. And we have got some answers coming in from our writing task. So we've got one from Ilfra, which says, a comfy chair with loads of blankets and a good book, most likely Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or my home where I can't get judged because of anything, which I think sounds like a beautiful setting as well, very similar to my ideal place, free from prejudice and discrimination. We've got another one from Yardley. My safe space is in my own mind. That's amazing. I can think about whatever I want to, and I know that I will not be judged or discouraged, which I think that just shows so much power there, doesn't it? To have that kind of confidence in your mind, which I think is.
But you know what's really great about that is you can take it anywhere you go.
Yeah, that's so true. It actually reminds me of my granddad. He had a lot of kind of health issues and he was in hospital a lot. And he used to say as well, he would kind of think about places that he used to go to when he was younger and really think about the intricacies of those places. And I think that's really similar to that answer there. That's beautiful. Thank you. We've got one from Cherry Tree Primary. People enjoy their homes and it is their safe space with their families. Amazing. Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah, these are really lovely answers. Thank you so much.
And it's nice to hear different people's spaces and different people's imaginations. And of course, they can change.
Yeah.
People's safe spaces, can't they?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Okay, I think we can move on to our, we're just going to do the Slido again, actually, if that's okay. So if you want to kind of scan that QR code again at the top, we had quite a lot of confidence at the beginning. So let's think about now that we've kind of had some practice doing that writing activity, how confident do we feel in writing about a safe place free from prejudice and discrimination? And maybe that's something that you can carry on after as well, after the session today and beyond this session. But let's see some of these answers.
Oh, look at that. That's interesting. Yeah. People are putting in their information.
Yeah. Wow, we've got quite a high percentage for really confident, which is great. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. That's wonderful. I'm glad that you've kind of, hopefully it's been quite a nice therapeutic opportunity this morning to think about a safe place for you.
Yeah.
That's lovely. We're going to move to Anne's quote now, which another quote from her diary. Obviously, her writing experience for her was a great place for her to confide in and, you know, think about that in the future. She always had that ambition to be a published author, as we've discussed, but she didn't necessarily know that that was always going to happen from the beginning of writing a diary. So, dear Kitty, it's an odd idea for someone like me to keep a diary, not only because I've never done so before, but because it seems to me that neither I, nor for that matter anyone else, will be interested in the thoughts and writings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. I want to write, but more than that, I want to bring out all kinds of things that lie buried deep in my heart. And I think this quote really sort of resonates with me, Thomas, because I think it's so interesting that at the beginning, although she always had that ambition to be that published author, that she kind of thought that nobody would be interested in her work. And of course, we know the reach and the impact that her diary has had. And it really kind of shows to me the power of the written words and sharing those stories, particularly about really kind of important topics like the Holocaust. I think it's just such an interesting quote. Is there anything that kind of is particularly important for you with this quote, Thomas?
Well, I mean, two things to say. One is, I think for people who don't know, Dear Kitty, Kitty was the name that she actually gave to her diary. So she spoke to this imaginary character called Kitty, which was her diary, which I think was, as a writer, it's such a great idea, isn't it? Because it makes it personal and it's a conversation. And so somehow it brings it really alive. I think it's isn't it incredible that this is one of the most read books ever in history, and here is Anne full of doubt, full of kind of, she's not sure if anyone will want to read her words. She's quite modest, and you know, she's not sure where this will go, but she still does it. She still wants to write. She still wants to share her story because it's important.
Yeah, that's such an interesting insight, Thomas, because I think that shows us all that we can write, even if we haven't got that ambition to be a published author, just the act of writing itself and the power that writing can bring. Yeah, thank
absolutely.
you so much. We have got a couple more answers actually from our writing activity here, which is the first one that I'll read is from Alina. I think school is a safe place because although we are all different, we are all treated equally. And if there is a problem, it will be handled immediately, which is great to hear, isn't it?
Awesome. Yeah, very, very good. Can I read the next one?
Yes, go for it.
From Anas. My safe space is my bedroom with my Batman comic book. I love that. Yeah. When I was young, I loved comics. I absolutely loved comics. I like Tintin and Asterix and all those stories. And I also did like Batman, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four. I loved all that. Loved it.
Amazing. Thank you. And we would like to welcome now any questions for Thomas in general. So we have already had some in the chat here that I will read a few out because lots of people are really interested in your writing journey, Thomas.
Great.
I'm going to read the one from Zane first of all. When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
You know, It's funny. I actually do know the answer to that. I was 9 years old. I was sitting on my steps with my younger cousin James, and he said to me, "What do you want to do when you get older?" And I said, "I want to be a writer." But I said it in a way like it's impossible. It can't happen. And he said, "Yeah, it could happen. You could totally do that." And funnily enough, he's also now a writer as well. And I think it's sometimes we do know early on, sometimes we don't know. For me, I did know, and it took me a long time though to get there. It wasn't a straight path, but I did know when I was younger. And as I said earlier, I just loved to write. I did work in television for a while, and I've done some other things, but I always was drawn back to the written word and books.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Darby, how old were you when you wrote your first story?
My first story, well, how old was I? I would say about that age, somewhere between, I mean, these were, the 9, 10, maybe that kind of age. And and then when I was in my kind of maybe 14, 15, I started writing articles for my school newspaper. And then in my early 20s, I started writing my first articles for like newspapers, national newspapers. And then I started, one of the fun things I started doing is my sister had a video camera. So I just used to go out and try and make little stories with the video camera. And that was super fun. And then with my kids, because I think that's also part of my journey, I guess, if you want, is we started doing little books. So we'd get bits of paper and staple them together, and then they would write stories. And then I was reading stories to them, and that whole kind of thing, I think, is part of it. I think that took me back when I became a parent. It took me back to these books, which I just loved as a kid, and it made me want to really write a children's book. Because I love any books with pictures, with words.
Yeah, and I think, I've got your book here as well, Thomas, and I think adults can really enjoy children's books too. And sometimes there are so many kind of lessons that can be learned from children's books that it's just a beautiful experience to kind of immerse yourself in a children's book with illustrations as well. I think no matter what age you are.
I'm so glad you said that, because I don't really believe there's an age for reading books. People always ask me, what age do you have to be to read your books? I'm like, I'm hoping everybody would like, I mean, this book here, I told you earlier, A Monster Calls, I read this last week. It's one of the best books, any book of any kind I've read in the last 10 years. So, and it's supposedly for young adults. I think if it's a good story, and if it's true, if it's authentic, if you can really, I think as a reader, you can feel whether it's real or not, then, and if it's captivating and it's just a great read, then I think anyone can read it. That's what I think.
Yeah.
What do I know?
On the line of feelings, we've got a question here from Shauna that says, can you explain your feelings that you felt when you were creating the book, The House on the Canal?
Yeah. So thank you, Shauna. I mean, at times I found it quite difficult to write about it, because some of it's quite sad, because what happened to Anne and her family and the others. I felt, quite upset. Sometimes I got really excited to discover new aspects of the story, or to go visit their house. I was very lucky. I went to the Anne Frank house itself. It's open to the public. So I actually went to the house, and I was by myself. There was no one else in the building. It was early in the morning, and that was very, very special. So sometimes there are these moments. And then when I shared my book with a few people after I'd finished it, and it's always a very nervous moment. What do people think? Will they like it? Will they just say, this is terrible? And I remember the first time someone read it and they said, actually, that's not too bad. And that was exciting.
Yeah. I think you're being very modest there, Thomas. I'm sure they didn't say that. Okay, our next question there is from Nadra. What message would you give to young readers who want to do reading, and I guess writing as well? What kind of message would you give to them?
I would say read. I know it sounds silly, just read as much as you can and try different things. Sometimes, and I have this as well, some books are a bit harder than other books to read. You know, the words maybe a bit longer. Some of the characters are a bit complicated. Sometimes it's not obvious from the very beginning of the book what it's about. But if someone you trust tells you it's a good book, if you have someone you know who says, listen, it's an amazing book, then really try and keep going, because there are some books which are a little harder, but they're amazing. So, you know, I think if you can find someone who you share the same kind of tastes with, that you like books that they like, and you can then share those books with them, that you could recommend a book to them and that's a really great way to discover new books. A librarian, the person at the library can help, a teacher can help. And then, I mean, it's really fun to read books by the same author. I think that's really fun. But for me, I think it's also fun to try different authors as well, because then what you get to begin to see is that different ways of telling stories, ways that maybe you didn't know about, new ways, exciting ways. So yeah, try experimenting is really, I think that's worth doing.
Lovely, thank you. Another one from Manor. Is it easy to write a book and choose a title? I think that choosing the title bit there is particularly interesting. Great question.
Yes, hi Manor. So the title, I think, and choosing the book, I mean, that's actually for me the most difficult part of the whole process. It sounds silly, but choosing the book is actually really hard for me. It's not obvious always. And then the title, you're absolutely right, is absolutely essential. So for example, the German version of the book, they call it The Old House on the Canal. And to my ears, it doesn't sound quite as good in English, The Old House on the Canal, but in German, it sounds really great. So sometimes titles, I think, are not obvious. And then the cover, what does the actual cover look like? So let me just show you this book again. So this is the English version of the book. And it has, I don't know if you can see Otto and Anne at the front door. So the English and American publishers really wanted to see Anne, but the German publishers didn't do that. They wanted more of a mystery. So you can imagine the same cover, but without them. And then likewise, I've got another book for you here. This is one I did about a house in Germany. This is The House on the Lake. This is actually my family's house in Germany. And this is the English book, an American book. And you can see it's, I don't know if you can see, there's some planes in the air. They're walking through the snow. It's a little dark. It's a little sad, isn't it? It's a little cold. I mean, literally cold. And it gives you an impression maybe of war and people leaving. And then the German version of the same book is summer. It's summertime. And it's sunny and it's happy and it's warm and there's leaves on the tree. So I think it's really interesting the different choices people make about titles, as you asked, but also they call them jackets or the covers of the book. And people think really hard about it because it really, there's an English expression which is don't judge a book by its cover. But I actually think people do judge a book by its cover. So I think the cover is really important and it can be really fun. It's a really fun thing to try and get right.
I'm very guilty of judging a book by its cover. I appreciate the beautiful artwork and design that goes into them.
Yeah.
I think we've got a great question here from Ifra. How do you find the time to write and what time of day is best for you to write, which I think is particularly interesting.
So this is my job. I actually work every day, during the weekdays. So typically I get up and I'm trying to be at my desk by 8:30. And then I stop every day for lunch at 1 o'clock. My wife also writes. And so we have lunch together. Okay. I'm back at my desk around 1:30 or 2. And then I'll keep going till 5. So you can see it's really a regular thing. There's different parts to writing. There's the research. We've talked about that. Then there's the actual writing the story. And then the next phase, which actually is the longest part for me, is the editing. When I try and make the words better, I try to make the sounds better. I try to make sure the story makes sense and it kind of is interesting. And then once the book is actually published, when you actually have a physical book, then there's things like this, talking to people about the book or talking to people who are journalists. So there's there are these different moments, and I actually love every aspect of it. And because I've done a few books now, often I'm doing different things at the same time. So right now I'm talking to you about the book The House on the Canal, but I've just been working on my new book, picture book, which is about a woman who you may have heard of, or you may have heard of her books. Do you know the books, The Tiger Who Came to Tea?
Yes.
Do you know those books?
Yeah.
and she also did the books Mog the Cat.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so the woman who wrote those stories, amazing woman, her name is Judith Kerr. Oh, you say it Kerr, it's spelt Kerr, Judith Kerr. She also did some young adult books like When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit. And so my new book is about her house, which is in London. So I've been writing that now. So you see, I'm doing that while I'm talking about this other book. You know, so you do different things at the same time. So that takes a little bit of kind of coordination.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that challenging sometimes to kind of keep your head in one book space whilst also working on another?
Well, it's only challenging if I'm writing two books at the same time. Okay. Weirdly, I think it's a different part of my brain. I can talk about a book while I'm also writing another book. I just can't write two books, or I can't do two creative projects at this. Maybe if I had a different brain, I could do that, but I can't do that.
Okay, great. I think we've just got time for a few more questions.
Lovely.
So, Eva, what was your favorite subject in school? I'd be interested to know, Thomas. Were you drawn to the English in school, or were there other subjects?
I actually liked all the subjects. So I really liked maths. So I did maths A level. I did physics A level, but I also did English. So I liked doing a bit of both. I didn't like having to choose. So I really did like, I liked it all. I liked the other sciences a lot. I really enjoyed Spanish when I was younger, really enjoyed Spanish. And I also was quite sporty, so I liked doing a lot of sports. So I liked all those things.
Lovely. This is probably my favorite question that we've had this morning, which is from Kellen. If you could collab with any author, who would it be? It's
such a great question, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, wow, what a question. I feel very lucky to be working with this woman, this illustrator, Britta Teckentrup. I mean, she really is, not only she is a fantastic illustrator, and she's done all my picture books, or all our picture books, but she's also just a wonderful human being. She's kind and she's funny, and she's a very good storyteller. Who else would I like to work with? I know I've been talking about this book, A Monster Called Patrick Ness, I think is really an amazing writer. It'd be really fun to try and write a story with somebody else. And there's some fabulous illustrators out there, aren't there? I'll have to think about that. It's a great question. I'd really, such a great question. I know, because I like collaborating. One of the things I really like about writing is people ask me, what's it like to be by yourself all day, you know? And actually, I don't feel it's like that. I work with a large number of people, the people who make the book, the publishers, and so there's people who work on the cover, they work on the words, they work on the pictures, but also lots of other people I work with as a writer. So I actually quite like that. I don't feel by myself.
Great, thank you. Another really interesting question from Lily Ray from Hatcham Primary. You mentioned you find houses fascinating. Are there any other houses that you know of that have amazing stories? I know you mentioned one before, but is there any others?
Lily Ray, yes, there are. And there's some houses I'd love. I'd love to know what houses you guys would like to know about. There's some houses like the Hans Christian Andersen house. I think he's an interesting person. There's a painter called Frida Kahlo, who has a beautiful house. It's called the Blue House in Mexico City. I can just see the images, would be just absolutely wonderful. What other houses would I like to write about? I'd love ideas. If anyone's got any ideas about houses, I'd love to hear.
Shape Thomas's next book.
Yeah, exactly. Send us the ideas. Maybe something in France would be lovely. I'd like doing it in different countries. So far we've done one in America, we've done one in England, one in Germany, and one in the Netherlands. Maybe something in China or India would be lovely.
Mm.
But what I'm really interested in is houses which have interesting stories and histories, where they've seen a lot of things. So, and I love houses. I'm fascinated by houses because they provide shelter, but also they can be also some places which are difficult. Good things can happen in houses, but also bad things can happen in houses. So yeah, fascinated by them.
Great.
They literally keep us dry and they literally keep us warm. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Another question. This might be our final question.
Okay.
From Amal from Gaskell Primary School. What's the most surprising thing you learned while writing your books?
Amal, thank you for that. What's the most surprising thing I've learned? Well, I'll say this, which is that sometimes I don't think it's going to work. Sometimes I kind of lose hope and I think, I can't do it, and I'm not good enough. And what I've learned is that if you just keep going, if you keep working on the words, you keep working on the project, you can get there. And so just having that hope, having that belief, really, I think, is very useful to me.
Great. Thank you so much, Thomas. This has been such an interesting discussion.
It's been great. Thank you, Amber.
Great to have you with us this morning and learn more about the House on the Canal. For our audience, I would just like to tell you that if you haven't had one of our education programs in school, you can find out more information about that on our website, www.annefrank.org.uk, and you can get in touch with your closest Anne Frank worker to do that. And then just to finally finish, I wanted to show you again that QR code for Thomas's book, The House on the Canal, and the discount details available for that. So you can scan that code to get a copy from One Tree Books for $12.99, which is normally $14.99, and it's a signed copy from Thomas with free shipping as well. So it's a really, really amazing deal. But thank you so much, Thomas. It really has been a pleasure chatting to you.
It's Amber, you've been fantastic, and I've really enjoyed it. And happy World Book Day.
Yes, happy World Book Day. I'm going to go away and read some books now to celebrate.
Me too.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.